25,000 has been reached. And YouTube tradition expects, nay, insists, a Q&A video to celebrate. And like the valiant knight of yesteryear, I must heed the call. Alright, enough of that. Straight out of the gate, I have to give you a slight heads up. There were a few duplicate questions, or otherwise questions which more or less expanded on what another person had asked in another comment, intentionally or otherwise, I cannot say. So, rather than just crop out the comment and paste it in the video like I usually do, I shall amalgamate the matching of otherwise thematically similar questions into a small list and answer it that way. We good? Then let's roll. What are your favourite locomotives of each of the big four? For the GWR, it is the counties, the various 280s, including the Night Owls not far behind. LMS, extremely close toss-up between the IVID Class 2 260s and the 8Fs. For the Southern, original condition merchant navies. And for the LNER, I'm sure you don't even have to guess. With smoke deflectors and Great Northern Railway tenders, by the way. Will you do a video on X subject? This is a question I generally get asked quite a lot, even outside of Q&A prompts. Now, don't get me wrong, you're always welcome to ask, and by no means do I find it an insensitive question, if one can call it that. Fact of the matter is, I am extremely limited in resources, time, and yes, money. I get most of my footage whenever I am on holiday, and the same goes for literature on railways, be they British, Dutch, or otherwise. Bookshops over here aren't quite chomping at the bits to sell in-depth books on specific locomotives. And even if they were, not every locomotive or otherwise railway subject I can cover has images findable online which are in the public domain. I try to risk as little as possible when it comes to copyright attribution. I've received YouTube strikes over far less than a seemingly uncredited photograph. By the way, I do always try to credit them. So, as predictable as the answer may seem, a video will come out when it is ready to come out. What locomotive would you like to see made available in 00 gauge ready to run form? When I last answered this question, my prayers were answered by both KR Models and Ellis Clark announcing they were working on a 00 gauge Ministry of Supply / WD 210. So with the goalpost now having shifted, my new answer, perhaps predictably, will be LNER's Thompson A1 reclassified as A1/1 by Peppercorn. 60113 Great Northern carried 3 liveries and even had a few general shape alterations throughout her life, so any manufacturer could pull a W1 and appeal to as many modelers as possible. Will you do more Source Filmmaker train animations? I have been very careful to only mention him.
James murdered my dog.
Whenever I'm actively mocking him and his diehard fans who cannot seem to fathom that a grown man wouldn't be interested in making videos about such things. Yet, whenever I upload a video that is specifically meant as a train animation, people attribute a lot of things within that video as taking pages from the Little Blue Tank Engine. Some people will call it an issue of pride or ego, which I suppose is fair, but I view it more as an issue of morale. And how crushing it is when people think I'm just aping something meant for genuine toddlers for my own success. Whatever one's parameters for that are. So, no. Even though more and more tempting assets are made available for working with trades in Source Filmmaker, I must resist being railroaded into working on an animation only to be met with, "Oh, you took this from
Henry slept with my wife."
That is not to say I'll never animate again. In fact, I'm working on a rather experimental animation right now.
Oh, is this thing on?
But that's the thing. I really like to animate. So I'll do so for my own enjoyment. If you were to build another 00 gauge layout, what would it be? I have learned a lot from making Made Up Road, and that experience will definitely play a part into building a new layout whenever that inevitably happens. Cliffs are rarely this straight up without being fenced. I should really buy the buildings first and then decorate the layout. I should use Pico Point, stay away from Hornby track work. I should use more trees and remember to paint the track beforehand, and many more obvious things to keep in mind. So with those points in the back of my mind, there would be two layouts I would like to build, and I'm stretching the rules a bit because one of them is not technically 00. The 00 gauge layout would be a shrunken down version of a station like Carlisle, basically an East Coast Scottish version of Exeter St Thomas with a yard and industry off to the side. I specifically want the station area to be raised and the track to be doubled. The second lower relief HO layout would be a border terminus, allowing for Dutch, Belgian and German stock on one layout. This means I can keep a small motive power fleet, while still getting a wide variety of stock as a whole. Also, if space allowed for it, I would love a lower relief O gauge or Lego layout. Because bigger is just obviously cooler. What is your favourite pre-grouping railway? Whilst I would love to declare that the Great North of Scotland Railway is actually the best pre-grouping railway because it had just that special sauce which the other railway simply lacked, I'm following the crowd and I'll say the North British Railway is objectively such a more interesting railway. Yeah, I know. The biggest expansionist railway in Scotland, radiating into England from Mallaig to Morpeth or Carlisle to Montrose. But the big illustrious 440s and Atlantics is the more intriguing affair. Who would have guessed? Is there a locomotive you seriously dislike, perhaps unreasonably so? I genuinely dislike what the LNER P2 has become in popular consensus. Whenever you read about them, lyrics are always being waxed about their appearance, about how they could haul 18 bogies, about how they were massacred into ungainly Pacifics by someone who despised the designer of the P2s. And frankly, I am disappointed people simply ignore evidence to the contrary of the perceived might of these, admittedly rather interesting looking locos, in order to just keep an unchallenged outlook because Nigel Gresley could not possibly have made errors when instructing his draftsmen. If you could go back to any time in history to observe and partake in events, but not change them, which three would you choose? If I was to keep this exclusively related to railways, I know exactly what I would do. First, if we're going by chronological order, I'd try spending a working day, yes, working, on an early 1900s branch line. I want to experience that humdrum railway, a loco with a single carriage trundling up and down multiple times a day. Then I'd simply go train spotting at Carlisle in 1925. I'd love to see the actual condition of the locomotives, which liveries they'd wear, the clothes of the passengers, the atmosphere whenever a train departs. I would love to see that. Finally, I'd want to be on the Flying Scotsman USA tour. I wish to see the sights when hauled by that Frankenstein monster of a locomotive, which is somehow still puny when compared to the locomotives around it in that country, carrying on to those notorious parties deep into the night the tour was famous for. Obviously, I'd dip just before the proverbial hit the fan, as it were. What is your personal line in the sand for not buying from a company like Rapido? And what would said company have to do to make you give it another shot? I often find people surprised when I mention I won't buy Rapido products, and I don't mean genuine intrigue like, oh, that's curious. No, I mean like I kicked their firstborn child surprised. I suppose this is a bit to be expected, as I only ever mentioned my problem with Rapido in a video from February of 2023. But since then the story has progressed, so I shall retell the story. One of my favourite designs of all time is the Huntlet saddle tank, so when Rapido announced theirs, I wanted to be first in line when they did arrive at the shops. I purchased mine from Hatton's. The thing arrives and happily trundled around the track, couldn't even get it to stop on the dead zones if I tried. Then, as one does, I switched the points to see whether it can also make it across the dead zone. However, the loco seemed to climb the frog and dramatically topple over itself, laying sideways across the switchblades. And since then, without fail, the loco derails on any sort of point work. And I do mean any form of point work. Hornby, Fleischmann, Rocco, you name it, the Hunslet disagreed with it. Naturally, I shot a video of it happening, uploaded it as an unlisted video, and sent it to Rapido in a complaint forum. However, due to the way YouTube displays the views, I can see that to this day, nobody at Rapido has ever bothered to even open the link to watch the video. I sent a second forum, again no reply. Video view count did not go up. Then I complained over on X, formerly Twitter, And like all hip and cool companies, Rapido sends me some semi-automated response and tells me to fill in a complaint form. Then, and this takes the bloomin' cake, a significantly larger YouTuber posts a review of a Rapido product, and the loco has a chimney on the wonk. Rapido proceeds to rush to their aid to replace the model. It is astonishing. A company thinks it's a good operation of business to immediately rush to help someone popular with something as inconsequential as a wonky chimney, but won't even bother to even watch a video of one of their products croaking whenever it meets a point. You know, whenever a shunting engine meets a point. People love, and I do mean love, to cry foul when other manufacturers have done far less. So where do I draw the line? Disregard for their own shortcomings. At least Hornby fixed their Pacifics by giving them metal running plates. At least Bachmann started making their locos and tenders electrically connected. At least Helgen... Never mind. All of them, maybe minus Helgen, will even bother to give you some nonsense reason as to why their products might not be satisfactory. Rapido didn't even bother with me. So, I simply don't buy from a manufacturer like that. What Rapido would have to do to get back into my good graces, for as much as they need that, even though they're a company, they need my money far more than I need their product. Honestly, I'm not one to come back for seconds after a poor show the first time round. Perhaps if I was ever given, or otherwise, wouldn't have had to pay for a Rapido experience, maybe I'd give them a shot. But at the same time, this might be a small ocean, but there's more attractive fish than just this one, aye. Also, I've read some of your comments. No, I'm not buying a Rapido product. I'm absolutely not. You can say that I'm being unreasonable all you want. You're not going to get me to change my mind. This is absolutely astonishing, and if Hornby would have done this to any other YouTuber, they would have made an entire video about it. Be glad that I'm only making it a section from this Q&A. Went on a bit of a tangent there. None of that was scripted. And I apologise. I didn't mean to sound mean. Except to Helgen. And Rapido. They deserve it. If you could buy any railway, and I mean any railway, which one would it be? I can interpret this question in a way that encompasses revenue, or if revenue was somehow not an issue when operating said railway. But the former interpretation requires me to do econometrics, which requires math, so I'll pass. So I'll go straight to the more fun second interpretation.
Alright, put the
Romney Highland and Church Railway
in the bag! Put it in!
Why do you like British, specifically LNER steam, so much? If I was not allowed to answer familial ties, said with a healthy amount of modern-day tribalism, I would say the LNER tells a better story. Of the practically run-down railway which kept up appearances with publicity stunts to try and mask their dire financial position. No other British railway company could claim to be able to pick you up from Malleglade in the evening, run you down to Harwich overnight, and once you came off the ferry at Hoek van Holland, you were still hauled by one of their locomotives. Do you like Iron Brew? I'm going to say something sacrilegious here, but I'm not a fan of carbonated drinks, so generally, I'll pass on Iron Brew. Please don't shoot me. Thank you for watching, and once again, thank you for helping the channel getting to the point where I can say I've passed 25,000 subscribers. I hope to see you in the next one. Now, if you'll excuse me. I'm coming for you next!